Hi, everybody. I'm Derek Langernecker, and I run Alpha Brewing Company. It's the first time they've ever given me a microphone. It's nice. So are we going to start passing out the beers right away then?
In about maybe 3 minutes.
Okay.
3 minutes, so we got a few minutes to chat.
Cool. So Alpha Brewing Company is located at 1409 Washington in the rear. It's actually 1409 Lucas Avenue, but Lucas Avenue is only 1 block long, and nobody knows where it is. So we say our address is on Washington, and then you walk around the back of the building. We specialize in barrel-aged and sour beers, but we also have a nice complement of just regular, good old standard drinking beers like a stout, a pale ale, an IPA, a blonde ale, and then some fruited beers that we have on draft right now. But particularly we specialize in barrel-aged sours, or also normal beers that are aged in barrels that aren't particularly sour. We have 14 beers on draft, hopefully at most of the time, unless we're running out. And yeah, we opened in 2013, April 10th. So our 4th anniversary is coming up here in just a couple, 6 weeks or so, something like that, where we release our 2 favorite beers of the year. One's called Rouge Beer. It's a raspberry sour that's aged in stainless for about a year. And the other one's called the Sagua. It's named after my dog. It's a triple IPA, dry hopped with Mosaic and Simcoe and Centennial. And it's 9% and very juicy and delicious. So I guess you guys are like, how did this guy get to be doing this thing? So, right, yeah, I guess I probably look kind of young to some of you. I'm 30 years old. We opened the brewery when I was 25 with some great help from some friends and family in the way of money, which you need a lot of to open a brewery. But I started out brewing at Square One Brewery. Well, I wasn't the brewer. I was the glorified keg washer that got to look in on the brew days from time to time. It was a fun job, and I worked there for about a year until I had to go on vacation for 3 months. And then I came home, and my job went to somebody else. And that's when it kind of seemed like a good idea to open a brewery. There was a bunch of breweries opening at the time, because that was around 2011. I'm sure you guys know like 7 other breweries that opened that year. The 6 Row, Four Hands, Civil Life, Perennial, Urban Chestnut, all some good stuff. So it seemed like this cool new wave coming in, and I wanted to be a part of it. So that's when we started making plans to open the brewery. We have a 5-barrel brewing system. So I guess maybe you guys don't know these fancy beer words. A barrel of beer is 31 gallons. So the typical keg you had at your keg party in college, it's a half barrel. It's 15 and a half gallons, and it's half of a barrel of beer. Barrels are just a kind of archaic old English way of measuring things. For instance, a barrel of oil is 42 gallons, and a barrel of whiskey is 52.8 gallons, and a barrel of red wine is 58, and a barrel of white wine is 62 gallons. So I don't it's arbitrary numbers that make math really complicated, because typically when we sell beer to bars, we sell them in a 6th barrel, which is 5.166666 gallons. Makes a whole lot of sense. But so anyways, our brew house brews 5 barrels of beer at a time. We have 4 fermenters that are all also 5 barrels, and then we have 1 bright beer tank. And what a bright beer tank does is it allows you to condition your beer. It's essentially where you cool the beer down to serving temperature and you carbonate it. And then you keg it up, put it on draft, and out the door it goes. So in a typical week, we generally brew like twice or once or twice, depending on how it goes. Some of the beer is destined for barrels, and some of the beer is destined for just serving on draft. So typically, for a normal beer, like what I call normal, like a blonde ale, your IPA, your stout, that you're not putting into barrels or you're not aging, you brew up the beer. It takes about 3 weeks, I suppose. Get in the bright beer tank and get it on draft, and it's pretty quick in and out. Usually about 22 days is our average for turning over a batch of beer. But for the barrel age program, it takes about anywhere from 6 to 9 months to a year. Our oldest barrels are about 3 years old. Sorry, they're passing around beer. So we age beers in a variety of barrels. We have whiskey, rum barrels, bourbon barrels. We have some brandy barrels now. We have some red wine, some white wine. But even in those, we have some Chardonnay. We have some Zinfandel barrels, some Pinot Noir barrels. Yeah, I think that's about it. And also, like within the whiskey and bourbon barrels, we have Heaven Hill barrels coming in tomorrow to age the next batch of one of the beers you'll be having tonight. The Hunny Do brew. It's quad aged in this year Breckenridge bourbon, but next year it'll be aged in. For next year, it will be aged in Heaven Hill barrels. Yeah, barrel beer is pretty fun. We got the idea from our friends over at Modern. They were using these hops called Motueka. They're from New Zealand. They have quite the interesting, I'd say, cantaloupe-ish type flavors. Like really bright tropical, maybe mango-y. It's kind of funny because these are all words you hear at a snooty wine tasting. Do you get the blueberries or whatever? It's very light and tropical. We use Belgian yeast strain for it, which kind of boosts up the fruity esters, if you will. Cool. I like beer. It's around 6%. It's 40 IBUs. But the interesting thing about this beer, so if you've ever brewed beer or you're a home brewer or anything, the typical hop schedule for most beers is you put in a bittering addition at the beginning of the boil, and then you put in an addition at around 15 minutes, which is for the flavor, and then you put in another addition at 5 minutes, which is for the aroma, like 5 minutes before the end of the boil. That's pretty typical, straightforward for most beers that you would be drinking. For this one, and for a couple other beers that we have on draft, we've been experimenting with different hop schedules. So for instance, in this one, we did a hop addition at 20 and a hop addition at 7 minutes. So there's no bittering addition, and it does some interesting things. It calms down the flavor of the bitterness because of the way the alpha acids were extracted from the hops. So we have to use a lot more hops to achieve the same IBUs, because your extraction rate is much less at the end of the boil as opposed to the beginning. But it gives you a more rounder, smoother, somewhat fruity characteristic. Yeah, any questions?
Rather than doing it and talk about anything, feel free. I'm not putting you on the spot right away. If you can, that microphone is hot, so if you feel like you want to add something or give this guy a little support, feel free. So if you wanted all the hot flavor and all the hot aroma, and if you just divide it past the
Yeah, that's what we do. That's what we do for another. Sorry, it keeps clicking on me. Another IPA we have on draft. It's called Atheist Ale, and that one is only a 15-minute addition to achieve 70 IBUs. I mean, it requires a lot more hops because of the extraction of the alpha acids. Does anyone know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about these how to extract all the, like, what IBUs are? You guys understand what IBUs are? All of you? Who doesn't know what IBUs are? That's a better question. Y'all know. Okay, good. So, funny story. I was out in California, in Santa Rosa, and I was out there with my wife on this horrible trip where we had to go to a bunch of wineries and drink a bunch of wine and convince them to give us wine barrels. And we were drinking at some winery with the Airbnb hosts, and they were like, "Hey, we're going to this cool brewery around the corner here in Santa Rosa. It's called Russian River." And I was an idiot. I'd never heard of it before. Whatever, I'll go drink more with you. Woohoo! And we're at this beer festival in someone's backyard. All these growlers everywhere. It was ridiculously awesome. And I'm, stupid. What's this? I don't know what any of this is. And this guy is like, "Oh, hey, yeah, my name's Vinny. Yeah, these are some of our..." I didn't know this guy, but Vinny is apparently the brewer at Russian River. It's like world renowned. And I'm like, so they have this Pliny the Elder, Pliny the Younger, these famous beers, and I'm, oh, this is pretty good. Whatever. Tastes like beer. What's the secret, man? We're running a brewery now. It's like 3 months old. And he was like, yeah, secret is one hop addition. So I got to thinking about it. There's no way the one hop edition could be for bittering because it tastes really good. It doesn't taste like, hop toothpaste. So it must be a late edition. So we started toying around with that idea of doing one late edition. It worked out pretty good. On that trip, we came home with 16 wine barrels. It was super awesome. I was more happy about that than this IPA idea that was just floating around the back of my mind for a couple months while we're cranking out all these sour beers to be putting in barrels.
Can you tell us a little bit about that process of trying to actually get them to sell you barrels?
Oh, yeah. It's real fun.
You guys work with a broker now, or do you still do it yourself?
We use a couple brokers because sometimes barrels are real hard to get. Like, for instance, tequila barrels. Tequila legally is only allowed to be produced in Mexico. If you make an agave spirit in the United States, like Square One, Spirits of St. Louis, they make what most people would call a tequila if they smelled it, but they have to call it agave spirit because according to some sort of international something, Champagne's only allowed to be made in France, in Champagne region of France. Yeah, right. Parmesan cheese is only allowed to come from Italy. Prosecco is only North Italy around Milan. Yeah, Provel, yeah. Yeah. It's only allowed to be made in St. Louis. So there's all these sorts of different rules about all that stuff. I saw that article. That was crap. So getting tequila barrels is really tough because they have to come from Mexico and, there's customs and there's a line. And the thing about barrels is that you have to fill them in a very timely manner because you might not know this, but oak barrels are held together by the turgid pressure in the wood that pushes against the bands on it. So if you let your barrel dry out, the thing will fall apart like a house of cards. And it's happened to us several times. It happened to us the first time we got tequila barrels. We made this awesome Goza aged in them. It was ridiculous. It tasted like a margarita. The second time we got in tequila barrels, the hoops were falling off of them. The thing just crumbled as I was rolling it into the brewery. I was hoping sometimes, if it's not too bad, it's spray it down with water and soak it back up, and the wood expands, and it's all good. But this time, yeah, so $500 down the drain. That's woo, nice. You can buy a lot of beer with $500.
Why not just buy the agave spirit barrels over the U.S.? Is that easier, or?
Most tequilas aren't aged, or most agave spirits, most tequilas, if only the gold tequila is aged in barrels. The silver stuff is not aged. So
The agave spirits are not aged.
if they're clear, like the one at Square One, then they're not aged in barrels. And we've all had tequila. Most of it's pretty clear, like clear as vodka, and not yellow like rum or something like that. So, hey, if you know somebody, I'll be over there tomorrow. Yeah, let me know.
So what was the process like when you were in California?
So, out in California, we were pretty much cold calling. We're like Jehovah's Witnesses on all these wineries' doors, hey, my name's Derek, and we run this small brewery out in, St. Louis, and you've never heard of us, and we never heard of you either, but if you have some barrels, we'd really like to get some of those, and we want to figure this all out so you can ship them to us. Can you give them to us for free? All that sort of stuff. We showed up to this one winery, because it was April, and apparently in California, 60 degrees is real cold. So we show up to this winery, and there's a guy out front with a hatchet breaking up a barrel. We're like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, yeah, well, we're using it to heat the little stove inside of our barrel warehouse to keep it warm. All these barrels went sour. They're all crap. Well, that's exactly what we want is some sour barrels because you guys will see there's a... Oh, should we talk about the next beer? Not yet? Okay.
Wait till you get yours, plus we want to hear more of the story.
Right. So this guy's hacking up all these barrels, and we're about to cry because we really want these barrels. And the winemaker was just blown away that we would even want to attempt to buy some of these barrels that went sour on him because he dumped out the wine, and we're over here asking to get them, and he was baffled by it. There's a particular strain of wild yeast. It's called Brettanomyces. And if it infects wine, it's considered a very bad off flavor. But in most good sour beers, there's a lot of Brettanomyces floating around in it, which leads to the funky Brett-like aroma, usually described as like horse sweat leather, but that's for the wine schnapps. Okay, so what you guys got in front of you now is a beer called Rumspringa. Does anyone know what Rumspringa means? Yeah? Yeah? Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes they put speedometers in carriages. I've seen that.
Nah.
Carpet. I'm not kidding. Yeah. But,
You want a free beer?
yeah.
Hey, also, I forgot. Someone Instagram me. Who's Ice House Bra or something? Yeah, come get one. Cheers. Okay, so what we're drinking here is an acorn squash brown ale that was soured up with a particular souring bacteria called lactobacillus and then aged on cinnamon. So we took some acorn squash. Me and Riley, we cooked it up. It was a really fun afternoon drinking beers and burning yourself. And put the acorn squash in the mash because the rest of the grain bill on this is 2-row, which would give you very clear and yellow beer, like the last beer you guys had. So the colors from the acorn squash. We were so sick of drinking pumpkin beers, it's like everyone has a stupid pumpkin beer. Pumpkin this, pumpkin that. It's like, well, there's like a bazillion other squashes out there. Let's give another one a try. So, of course, we had to do the typical thing we do where we like put spices in it and then sour it up, mostly. So you can taste the cinnamon. It's got this kind of tart background flavor to it. Maybe it's a little more tart than mildly tart. Well, the older these beers get, the more tart they will get, which is why a lot of people age them. Years? Yeah? Something, I'm never convinced that aging beers for years is a good idea, but sometimes it works out. I don't know. I think there's a lot of expectation that your beer is going to be way more awesome in 3 years, and a lot of times it's just not the case. You want to get your IPA, you want to drink that as quick as you can because the hop flavor just goes away. It's really sad. For a barley wine, for a Belgian quad, like we're going to have in a little bit, those big, bold beers usually tend to calm down on the boozy flavor after they've been in bottles and out of the barrel. So the beer, like this Hunny Do beer that we're going to have in a little bit, it's a Belgian-style quad. It was sat in those Breckenridge bourbon barrels for about, I guess, like 10 months or so. But it was picking up all this boozy flavor out of the barrels during that time. Then we bottled it and kegged it. And then, so there's no more whiskey being added to it while it's in the bottle, of course. So those liquor flavors are going to calm down over time. And it's kind of funny. So every year we release this Russian Imperial Stout called Muscovy. This year was aged in brandy barrels. It was 14%. It's trying to kill people. But we also had a keg of last year's on draft that we saved and nurtured inside the walk-in. And last year's keg was really calmed down, even though it was aged in Four Roses barrels itself. The bourbon, the bourbon flavor just kind of smoothed on out. And this year's came out like a rocket ship, right out of the barrels, like. But it's been on draft for like 2 months now. I think Riley would agree. It's definitely smoothed out, and over time you will find that beers like that tend to smooth out much better. The only other time, sours are great to age, but typically they've been in barrels for months or years also, so I don't really see a whole bunch of added benefit to it. There could be some concerns. Sometimes sours can get overcarbed in the bottle. If the bacteria keeps doing good little things, it's going to make it super sour, really funky or something, but it could also turn into a bottle bomb, which is really bad for your cellar because you'll just hear it go off in the middle of the night and wonder which one you lost.
What does everybody think about this? I personally think this is maybe the best beer of the semester so far. That's just my opinion. I think this is awesome. Really, really good. What about people that don't like sours? What do you all think of this? Everybody likes it? People that don't like sours? That's great. This is not a very sour beer, obviously. It's really more of a tart beer.
Right.
Sour, I would say. But this is freaking delicious. Really good.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a pleasant surprise. I hate sour, so this is
Cool.
Right on.
He said I should give these away to him. It's the.
Oh, I get one?
You want a free beer? See, here's the thing. You guys get a free beer, and then if you want to do your homework, you have to actually buy another beer. Ooh, yeah, he was thinking ahead. Wait, so I got to look at my cheat sheet here. What else do I have to talk about?
Can you tell us about this? Can you tell us anything else about this beer that everybody loves, even people that hate sours?
What yeast is in it? Oh, IBUs? 10, I think. 1? What was it? 10? 1? 1? There you go. Between 10 and 1. AVV? It should be about 6.5. Cool. No questions about this one? Yes, sir?
So why do they call it Rumspringa? My best friend from Germany is Rumspringa.
Oh, right. Well, like our friend up here in the corner said, so Rumspringa is when the Dutch children, they pretty much get kicked out of the Amish community for, I don't know, a period of a couple months or something to go experience the real world. And then they get to decide if they come back or not. Maybe you've seen the TV show Breaking Amish. I don't know. If you see a picture on the bottle, though, it's a picture of American Gothic. Yeah, that one. So, I don't know. It was kind of a fall-time festive-y type beer, and it's been in bottles since after Halloween, I believe. But I thought it really aged up really nice, so I wanted to come share it with you guys.
Is that a squirrel?
Yeah, it's a squirrel. The caption's kind of funny, too.
Here, can you tell us about packaging of these beers? Are they available? Where can we find beer, typically speaking, and how many are available in bottles versus draft, and how's that work?
Right. So we only bottle up a limited number of any beer that we determine is really awesome and we want to bottle up. Generally, they're available down at the brewery. Everything we have is available at the brewery. What now? Oh, yeah. So the bottle shops are available at, one's called Gezellig. Buddy of mine from high school opened that one up, so you guys should all go check it out. Really cool place. Bunch of coolers, and they have like 50 beers on tap, I think, or 25. It's on the Grove, on Manchester in the Grove, in the old demo space. Then we're available at Hop Shop, which is down on Cherokee Street, like right at Cherokee and Jefferson. And then we're available on draft at Foam, which is a music place on Cherokee. Manja, which is on South Grand, like on the strip on Grand. Oh, yeah, we have... It's on draft here, too. And West End Pub. So right now, we're producing, out of each batch of beer, we're usually only getting like eight kegs on a good day. Sometimes out of the barrels, it evaporates, which is terrible. The beer evaporates out of the barrels, so we get some loss there, so sometimes we only get 6 kegs out of a batch on that. So we've really kept our distribution really close. Well, we're working on a project to get more beer out to all of you nice folks real soon, like. So, we got a new beer? No?
You're about to get yours.
Okay.
Question?
We do about 200 barrels a year, so not a lot. If you have some money, we can talk after the show.
So, Derek, is there a long-term plan? Is there, besides finding somebody with money, are you trying to do that now?
Yeah, we're working on a project, but I can't spill any beans about it because,
We don't talk to anybody.
oh, yeah, right.
They don't know, really that camera back there is just a dummy. Just to make you feel cool with the microphone.
I will encourage you all this. If you want to know the details to any future plans coming up, you should come to our anniversary party, which is on Saturday, April 8th at the brewery. Got live music and a bunch of other cool stuff. Thank you. This kind of series that we've been having going, trying to nail down the dynamics of barrels. So this one is a Pinot Noir barrel-aged sour blonde. It's about 7%. I think it's 1 IBU. Pretty sure it's 1 IBU. 7. It's just called Pinot Saison because we haven't gotten creative enough to come up with a really fancy name quite yet. So the process for making this beer, so the yeast is a very interesting story. Out of that batch of barrels that we got from California from that story a long time ago, we picked up some Lucy Rosé barrels from a winery called Pisoni Winery. You guys might know this. They like donate money to Susan G. Komen or something for this rosé. Anyways, so being the scientist that I like to proclaim to be, we got out some plates and we started streaking some cultures to try and isolate the yeast strain going on inside this barrel. The plate blew up and we got thousands of different little spots to pick from. We picked a couple, grew it up, and we started producing this beer. So I sent the yeast culture off to White Labs so they could like bank it for me and we could make sure we didn't screw it up or accidentally dump out the yeast or something. And they told me they couldn't because there's more than 1,000 strains of yeast in that. Yeah, so I don't know what that quite means, but anyways, so we've kept this same pitch of yeast going for about 3 years now. And if you homebrew or anything, you know that usually like between 6 and 7 flips on a particular yeast is all you should do before you start getting some weird stuff. I'm not quite sure why this one's been so good to us, but it's been really good because we've probably used it about 100 times. It just keeps going and going and going. I love it. So as far as they could tell, there are Saccharomyces strains in there, which are typical brewer's yeast. They're, things you brew your IPA with, things you brew your Saison with, and your stout. And then there's Brettanomyces strains in there, which we talked about. They give it kind of a funky flavor. They're described as horse sweat leather, although I don't like that description. Like, funk is just good for me. And then the other one in there for sure, the other one in there that's good is Lactobacillus. Now, Lactobacillus isn't a yeast, it's a bacteria. It's, maybe you could tell from the name, it produces lactic acid, which is what makes these beers tart. The first one, the Rumspringa, and this Pinot Saison both have lactobacillus in them that produce lactic acid, soured up the beer. Let me tell you, lactobacillus is on everything, everywhere. It's all over you, it's all over the grain, it's all over the brew room. I think it's kind of a miracle that brewers can actually make beer that isn't sour, much less make sour beers, just because of the fact that the bacteria that makes sour beers is literally everywhere. So, any questions about Pinot? Something?
So this is the beer you take to your family's house when they say, we don't like beer, we want wine.
Yeah.
Beer because, somebody that likes sweet wine will probably like this. Somebody that likes dry wine will like this. It's really an easy beer to bring to somebody that doesn't want beer. And if you want to take beer to your family's house and they say, bring wine, just bring this and tell them it's wine. And see what they say. I'm not kidding. There's a lot of wine flavor in this beer, first of all. It's just really easy to drink. So I highly recommend some of you guys try that. Just saying.
Cool.
Go to the brewery, get a growler, or come here actually. So
We transfer it to wine bottles.
Right.
yeah, that's a good idea. And put a label with your family name on it. Like, yeah, this is our family wine.
So you said it's from rosé bottles?
It's from rosé wine. So we took these barrels and we essentially grew up the yeast that was already in there. You guys might not know this either, but most wine is wildly naturally fermented. They don't take yeast from some lab somewhere and pitch it in the I can't remember what it's called, the must or whatever. The must. It's the crushed grapes. They don't add yeast to it. They just use the yeast that's naturally occurring on the outside of the grapes themselves. Take the grapes, crush them, and then it starts to magically do something.
So then why is it called Pinot?
Oh, because it's aged in Pinot Noir barrels. So the yeast is from rosé barrels, but the barrels we aged it in is Pinot. The yeast is from the rosé barrels. The beer was aged in Pinot Noir barrels. But the rosé was made with Pinot Noir grapes. So there you go. To India, I had this delicious jackfruit, and we had to do a Brett beer with it. We've been doing this Brett series. It's the Brettanomyces yeast series. The recipe for the beer is 2 row grain, 1 IBU, and Brettanomyces and fruit. So we take these barrels and we stuff it full of whatever fruit we have. We add the Brett, and it's off and running. We've done a jackfruit one. We did a cantaloupe one. We did a Hunny Do one, blackberry. The next one to come out for us is white grape, which should be out in like a month and a half or so. We just ran out of a papaya one. Our anniversary beer, the Rouge beer, is a raspberry Brett. What else do we have going? I can't think of any more. Yes, Hunny Do. This is Hunny Do. It's got a good story too. So, my wife started dating me before we opened the brewery, if you can believe that. And we got married after we opened it. Yes, I know, right? Because I was there drinking every day. So, to celebrate our marriage, she brewed a beer, and I brewed a beer. Her beer is called I Do. It's a little tamer. It's a Belgian triple. This is my response to her Foo-Fooey triple beer. It's a Belgian quad aged in Breckenridge bourbon barrels this year. We release it generally in the middle of January every year because it's kind of a Valentine's-y beer. Yeah, oh yes, that's why it's called Hunny Do. Yes. So, it's 2 row, honey, 40 IBUs, and barrel for about 10 months. We use a Missouri wildflower honey because it's good and it's local and sustainably produced. I'm all about that stuff. This one's 12. This is 12%, and it's 40 IBUs.
Kind of tastes like candy. What do you guys think?
The aroma in this beer, pretty bourbony, vanilla-y, I would dare I say. The flavor, you can definitely taste the honey. There's a bit of back sweetness to it. What do you guys think? Too much? Not enough? Could go a little higher? I heard someone say 15% back there. So this barrel project is really interesting. It's quite fun. We do all sorts of interesting barrel projects. I can tell you about a couple that didn't work out. I can tell you about some of the cool ones that we do have on draft that worked out fantastically. We do this beer called Delphian. It's a sour blonde, very similar to the Pinot, but it's really interesting to try them on draft at the same time because it's the same recipe, just different barrels. The Pinot Noir barrel, very earthy. The Chardonnay barrels, very light, fruity, tangerine, lemon, limey, zesty. Those sort of interesting flavors. It's fun to try them back and forth against each other. I think it's Riley's favorite beer, maybe, because he drinks a lot of it. So this, if you can think of the Pinot Saison that we had a little bit ago, this is the same yeast strain and the same barrels, but different grain. So this one's aged in Pinot Noir barrels also. The grain bill consists of 11% chocolate malt, 11% Black Prince, which is a debittered black malt. The chocolate malt's obviously going to give it some toasty characters. The Black Prince, it's going to give it that roastiness. And it really pairs well like this dark fruit, datey, stone fruit, like dark cherries, plums, dates, those sort of flavors that then you meld with the Pinot Noir that's still in the wood in the barrel. And it rounds it into a big, nice, dark. I mean, it doesn't taste like a stout, and it doesn't have the body of a stout, but it has this round, good red wine flavor. It's also 1 IBU. It's also 7%. It's funny what a little grain can do, right? Because it's only 11% of the whole grain. The entire thing turns it black. It's a lot different. So clearly I'm not the first one to invent any sort of ridiculous barrel-aged sour program or anything like that, or to brew beer or any other thing we've done. We're all following in the footsteps of all the people that were out in front of us. When we first opened the brewery, Schlafly helped us get our license. I think they probably helped everyone else out in town. They loaned us grain for our first batch of beer because the grain truck was late, as it is this week again. Urban Chestnut helped us out with getting our wholesale license so we can get a couple kegs out of beer out to bars like this. If we didn't have that license, we wouldn't be here today. And Square One, obviously, Dr. Whitty, their brewer over there, he was instrumental in training me how to do all these sort of things. And I just put my own nice little spin on it at the end of the day. So I'm grateful to everyone. I mean, the beer community in St. Louis is just fantastic. Everyone thinks like, oh man, you guys are always fighting with each other. No. Don't read Riverfront Times. We see each other all the time. We go to fests all the time. Everyone's alone and everyone ingredients all the time. Ideas and helping people. And yeah, well, I mean, we all drink a lot. Come on. We have a lot of fun together. So, does anyone who likes this beer? Yeah? Pretty good? Pretty good enough? Cool. About half the beers we have on tap down at the brewery have been in oak at some point. And the other half, blonde, red, stout, IPA, the Passport Pale you had before, and Mag Jew beer tomorrow.